Hey everybody, this is Soger. This is going to be my city-state tier list, and I'll also just describe strategies involving each city-state if it's relevant when I get to them. Before that, let me just get this out of the way. For people who are unfamiliar with me, I play single-player deity or higher difficulty, and my goal every single game is to win in the fewest turns possible. This is important because if you play a more casual game or multiplayer, these strategies or these rankings may not make sense to you because they aren't for the way that you are playing. This is all just, hey, will this city state help you win the game faster? Right, so now let's look at how I'm going to be ranking these city states. One, I'm only going to do our S, A, B, and C tier. S tier is in every situation, you should do everything in your power to get cesareity of the city state. It is one of the most important things in the game. A tier is in almost every situation, this city state's going to help. B tier is you're situational. If your situation meets its needs, it will help, but there will also be situations where it doesn't help. And then C tier is going to be city states that the only reason to ever get cesareity of them is for utility purposes, to do a levy war, to get early exploration, stuff like that. When I'm judging these city states, that's going to be judged by how good their ability is length of game, because there's plenty of city states that are very, very good at the end game, but that doesn't matter. The majority of the game is the early mid game, obviously. End game doesn't really have that much effect on the outcome. So it's going to be length of game, how important is their ability, what their ability actually provides, obviously, and finally the general use of the ability. Like, how often are you going to be able to use it? So something that is very situational obviously is going to rank lower than something that will improve every single game. All right, let's get going into the rankings. Culture city states are the strongest city state, in my opinion, if you're looking at the just one envoy bonus. It provides one culture per turn, as well as one culture per turn for cities with an amphitheater. And let's be realistic, for the majority of the game, you're never going to see the second part of that. This is a complete one culture per turn per envoy, and that is how vital culture is. Because if you look, even at turn 100, in most games, you're going to be sitting at somewhere between 70 to 120 culture. That's still, in most cases, a little bit over 1% of your total culture per turn. There is very few times where any of the other city states can say that at turn 100, which is the halfway point in a sub 200 game if you are performing poorly. There's just no situation where any other yield is going to provide better return on investment than getting that extra culture, because every power jump is in the culture tree. All your governor titles, all of your policy cards, serfdom is in the culture tree, early empire for selling open borders and the 50% production to settler card. Like, culture, especially early culture, is the most important yield in the game. So any source of early culture or culture at any point in the game is incredibly valuable. So I generally save my envoys in the early game until I find the majority of the city states, unless I have the opportunity for Caesarean, in hopes that I find a culture city state, because I would rather sit on an envoy in a lot of cases than miss the opportunity to get that one culture per turn. Antananarivo is the first culture city state, and their Caesarean bonus is plus 2% culture for every great person that you've earned through the course of the game, up to 30%. This takes a while to start delivering, but it provides 2% of your overall culture. That by about mid game, if you're getting a decent supply of great people, which if you're going trade districts in every city, you should be getting a decent amount. If you're playing a culture or a science game, you should be getting a decent amount of the the great people for those districts. This once it starts paying off, pays off a ton. It would be S tier if like if it didn't take so long to get more than like one or two great people. But right now, this is a very strong city state that does take off in the mid game, early game. I would pass on it in the early game, but once it starts showing some return on investment, it is really, really strong. That would be A tier. Ayutthaya is the second culture city state, and their Caesarean bonus is you get 10% of the production cost of a building returned as culture on the completion of the building. And this doesn't matter if you buy or produce the building, just if you create a building, you get the culture. This is the exact opposite of the first city state. This pays off really, really well in the early and mid game, and it starts falling off at the end of the game because you're just not building as many buildings because early culture is so important. It eggs out being slightly better, but once again, it doesn't hold up length of game because both mid game, you're just not building as many buildings. So I would say this is a high priority super early game. Mid game, it's still valuable, but you're nowhere near getting the return on investment on it. But you can't go wrong A tier. Caguana is the next culture city state, and their Caesarean bonus is it unlocks access to the Bailey tile improvement, which provides one culture plus one culture for every bonus resource that's adjacent, and plus one culture for every adjacent entertainment center, which increases to plus two if you unlock exploration. The first thing I should note is exploration doesn't lead to anything, so unless you want to go into Merchant Republic government, there's no reason to unlock it. So that takes a little bit off this tile improvement already. Next, it can only go on flat tiles and it's not spammable, which means it can't be touching itself, which, yeah, that's fine. It's an easy way to get culture on tiles. It's the best non-spammable no housing tile improvement because it has the highest top end of culture that you can produce. But because it doesn't provide a free technology, I still think Naladia is slightly better. The other thing it has going against it is by and large bonus resources are going to be chopped, and unless you get like the perfect tile that's completely surrounded in them, you're just not going to see much of a return on this. It works for tourism with flight, so if you don't have better options and you do have a bonus resource heavy area, this can deliver. But length of game, this just isn't returning enough in my opinion. It's going to be in B tier. Kumasi is the next cultural city state, and their Caesarean bonus is your trade routes to any city state get two culture and one gold for every district in the origin city. I've said multiple times that international trade isn't worth it. This is when international trade is worth it. You still have to balance your growth versus your culture output that Kumasi can provide. But this is a very easy way to get a lot of culture early in the game. It's so strong, it makes me deviate from domestic trade in the early game. The scaling on this, if you can get like a decent high population capital that gets to like seven population, that's gonna get to six culture on every trade route to a city state. And you don't need to be Caesarean to the city state, it's literally just any city state. So this is incredibly strong, incredibly impactful. The gold per turn is completely unnecessary. This would be A tier without the extra gold per turn. That is like such a throwaway part to the ability. The fact that you can get just ridiculous returns on culture for international trade, and this scales well into the mid game and late game when you start wanting to send international trade routes. So yeah, just overall, A tier. It would be S tier if it wasn't for the fact that domestic trade is just so much better. You do sort of lose a growth in some of your later settled cities to utilize this. Mohenjo Daro is the next cultural city state, and it gives all of your cities the same level of housing as if you settled on fresh water like a river. I know a lot of people don't like this city state because it goes and counteracts the aqueduct ability and gives you less housing. But for me, when I only want 7 or 10 population in most of my cities, this means I never have to do anything for housing. I don't need to build any farms. I don't need to build any granaries. This solves all of my housing in every single city the second I become Caesarian of it. So for me, it's A tier. I understand why other people might not like it as much, but for me, this solves a problem. It gets me to the end of the game really a lot earlier because I'm not wasting any production on granaries and I'm not wasting builder charges on farms or tile improvements for housing. So A tier, yes. Nan Madol is the next cultural city state, and their Caesarian bonus is +2 culture for all districts adjacent to or on a coast or lake tile. This is an incredible city state because there's no trade-off. You get +2 culture just as long as your district meets the requirements. So even though Kumasi has a higher top end of cultural output, in my opinion, this is better because there's no trade-off. Did you build any harbors? Here's 2 culture. Do you have any city centers on the coast? Here's 2 culture. I mean, it's just a universally great city state. Unless you're playing a Highlands map, you're going to see some return for absolutely no cost. It's just rewarding you existing S tier. Rapa Nui is the next cultural city-state, and this should be in a tier by itself. Rapa Nui is the single strongest city-state in the game. There is absolutely no competition. Their Caesarian bonus is it unlocks the Moai tile improvement, which is +1 culture and +1 culture for every 2 adjacent Moai. Once you get to medieval fairs, it's +1 culture for every adjacent Moai. It's plus two culture if it's adjacent to volcanic soil, and +1 culture if it's adjacent to a coast or a lake. So, in other words, this is the highest cultural output item in the game. You can get 4, 5, 6 culture per turn on a tile. This is how much culture you need to produce to make everything else not matter. It doesn't matter that there's no housing, it doesn't matter that it provides no growth. This makes every single civilization in the game a top tier civilization because this answers the question of what should I put on this tile 100% of the time. Moai, chop all the woods, chop all the rainforest, just put down Moai. It's once you unlock flight, if you've just spammed Moais, you are going to win the game. That is really the only negative I have to say about Rapa Nui is that if you abuse the Moai too much, it's hard not to win after unlocking flight. But realistically, the second you see Rapa Nui, you should get Caesarity of them. You should start producing builders, and you should be making every city in your empire working the Moai tile and chopping every tile out and having every single tile be a Moai. You will be up that culture tree at the fastest you've ever been, and you will win some of the fastest culture victories possible. It helps in every victory type because I mean massive amounts of culture helps every victory because the culture tree is what wins games. So Rapa Nui, S tier, best city state in the game. Vilnus is the final cultural city-state, and their Caesarian bonus is you get better adjacency if you have a higher level of alliance. You're trying to win under 200 turns. You're never going to see a bonus for this. Even if even if you're playing a 500 turn game, you're just barely finishing it before the game comes to a score victory, you're going to see such a small return on this. If it wasn't a cultural city-state, I would put it down there with Preslov and how bad it is. But it gets points just because you're going to get the 1 culture per turn when you put your first envoy in there. That is the only thing keeping this from being the worst city state, in my opinion, is just the fact that you're getting culture because it exists. But this city state, it's just not worth envoys. Thank you for watching my video. If you want to click the playlist, you can watch the other city state categories and follow along for the other city state categories I haven't finished recording yet. Thank you for watching and bye.